Hey, I'm Triche, and you're checking out Radio 1 Chicago.
Alex is going to take over.
Yeah. Guitarras, Gabe. We got to work on this. But this is Alex, and throwing it to the green room, as Gabe said. Joining me in studio today is Chicago-based independent publisher of children's books that celebrate diversity, Triche of Tiger Stripe Books. How are you?
I'm doing great. I'm glad to be here.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yes, of course. That absolutely a pleasure. And like I always mention to Gabe and to any other artists that come in, like musician-wise, like I love it when people bring us gifts, and you brought us books. So
of course.
I'm like, yay, that's me just being, just me. Like, I love gifts. Like, thanks for coming. But welcome. So just to jump in, tell us a little bit more about your background. We were talking a little bit before the break how you are a transplant to Chicago. So
I'm a transplant. Yes. I grew up in Phoenix, Arizona, but I've been in Chicago for 16 years.
Okay.
But so yeah, I love the city, and publishing is part of the reason why I came. Every little girl grows up and wants to be a publisher, right?
Yes,
and
absolutely.
So just like that, it's like princess or publisher. I choose publisher.
Yeah.
So I've always wanted to do it, and I think that over the course of my life, that dictated where I would, what types of books I would publish. So when I was young and in high school, I wanted to publish magazines because I loved magazines. Mm-hmm. But as I grew up and I worked in book publishing, I on the educational side, educational publishing, and I had children, then I was like, children's books are where it's at. And I remembered when I was getting books for my youngest, I remembered books that I loved as a child and how they impacted my whole entire life and set me up for this is why I do the things that I do. And so I thought children's books were awesome and what I wanted to do.
Nice. Yeah. And can you describe how what the difference between educational publishing is and what other sectors are there? I'm not too familiar with the subject. So.
Oh, sure. So educational publishing that I worked in, we work in textbooks and we create educational materials for different classes, college classes, and even textbooks that you get in grade school and such like that. So I worked for National Geographic's School Publishing Division here in Chicago for almost a decade in the operations side, and got a chance to see some amazing things, and it just inspired my love and my passion for children's books and really getting books out there that send a message but that first celebrate diversity.
Mm-hmm. And then coming to Chicago, you said publishing was a big part of that as to why you came. Mm-hmm. So then was it how was it growing, being in the city and living in the city and doing all these things? How was it that impact you in the way that you thought I want to publish these books that do celebrate diversity?
Well, I think that, so there's a few things. I mean, you can't walk through the city and not see 1,000 stories. Mm-hmm. Just because walking the streets of Chicago, you run into so many different characters and so many different types of people. And I think that, growing up in Phoenix, which is not as diverse, I didn't have that feeling. And so coming to Chicago and just the richness of the culture of the city was part of what inspired the publishing, what I do. Mm-hmm. And so one of our first books, the Q Saves the Sun, it is a Chicago family. And I love that we're looking at a family that lives on the south side of Chicago. But there's families all over the city with different stories, and it's never ending in terms of just the number of stories. We could do all of our stories about Chicago families, really, and kids that live in Chicago.
Yeah, absolutely. And that was actually going to be one of my questions. Do all of your one, do all of the authors that you work with, are they all from Chicago? And then like, are all those stories, like, do they have to be Chicago based, or can it just be wide ranging, like anywhere?
It can be anywhere. Most of my authors and illustrators are here in Chicago. They found me, it's like you just find people in different ways, and there's a lot of amazing talent here in Chicago. But it doesn't have to be that way. In fact, I do have a few books that I'm working on now that the writers are from different cities.
Gotcha.
Other than Chicago. And it just so happens that Q Saves the Sun is based in Chicago, and his family and the series will be based in Chicago, but we do go all the way to Africa in our books. So
it just stems and goes wherever.
Yes,
wherever your mind goes.
Yes, yes.
So tell us how like the development of the Tiger Stripe books came about, like the background, like what kind of birthed that idea.
Well, I had been, I'd been working in publishing, but then on the side, I would help people self-publish their books. And so my first real exciting, children's book that I helped publish was I worked with two ladies, they had a TV show called Granny's on Safari. And they had this great children's story about an elephant that got stuck in the mud. And, it was a really cute story. But they didn't have an illustrator, and they needed some help with the editing. And so I worked with them on that to develop that book. And so I would do these little projects on the side. And then one night I found out that this nightly ritual between my son and my husband, my son would ask my husband what he should dream about, and then my husband would give him like some crazy far out thing, and then in the morning he would report back like, okay, this is what happened. And I was like you guys have been doing this every night? I had no idea. And
you're like, why can't I chime in? Like,
I know,
you're like, I want to in on that.
Left mom out of it.
Yeah.
And so I was like, that would be a really awesome book. And so I talked to a writer friend of mine, and he liked the idea so much that he wanted to not just write it, but co-publish it with me, Isaac Perry. And so that's how our first Q Saves the Sun came about. And I was like, this is the time, this is the time for Tiger Stripe books, because we had been doing, kind of partnering with other people or doing, this behind the scenes type of work. And so I decided that this was the title, and that this was what we were, this was going to be our first title and what we were going to do. So.
So in addition to the author who wrote, Q Saves the Sun, did you also co-write that then, or did you just co-publish it?
I just co-published it. Yeah. I mean, I was the editor on it, and we really worked hand in hand in developing the manuscript. I would give him lots of feedback, including mom feedback, like, okay, there can't be so much shooting up of the aliens.
Gotcha.
And we have to have a lesson in here and that type of thing. But he wrote it.
So tell us more about the series of aspect of it. I know you gave a copy to Gabe, so I haven't had a chance to look at it, Gabe. I'm just super jealous that he gets it and I don't. But so tell us more about the series. Like, is he going to go on like wild adventures and just different things every time, every book? Or
yes, so he's going to go to different places every book. So this first book, he has to save the sun from aliens have kidnapped our sun. And so he actually goes into outer space to accomplish this particular mission. So when he goes into space, it's always at night. And when he goes on his missions, it's at night, of course. And he has this little stuffed animal that he sleeps with, and it turns into a big, real-sized Tyrannosaurus Rex. And so that's his sidekick when he goes on his missions. And so first of all, he goes into space, and then the next two books, I have an inkling, but the writer doesn't really want me to,
Gotcha. No worries.
So, but I can say that he does stay in the city. He stays in Chicago for the next book, and it is a little Batman-esque, if you will. So
you're like, that's all I can
That's all I can say.
So you do have 3 or two other titles here in addition to Q Saves the World. So tell us a little bit more about these. They look a little bit different. This one, you know, they can't, our listeners can't see it, but one of them looks more like textbook, kind of like a workbook, like this one here, and then the other, it's like, you know, just a standard book. So tell us more about these guys.
Yes. Okay. So one of our other books is called How I Became We. It's another picture book, and it's written by Dr. Raquel Monroe, and it's a story about ego. And our main character's name is I. So how I became we, I is the main character, and I is a gender neutral character. And really it's about how I just want everything. And I know we don't know anybody like that, right? That they would just want a whole bunch of stuff. And then what I realize is that it's so hard to just have all this stuff and not have any friends and not have the love of other people. And so I realize is that it's better to not have all this stuff. It's better to have friendship, and that, you know, we need to value that in life. And so I think when I read the manuscript, I thought this is such a universal message. It's like everybody at every age needs to be at least reminded of this. I think children especially, you know, like they really need this over and over. This like, okay.
Yeah.
But even for adults, I think that we kind of need that ego check every once in a while. And so that's what How I Became We is. And then Songs for Learning, it is a playbook, which is also it's a workbook, and it is music based. So it comes with music, and there's a song for every unit, and it's a really fun, you know, it's a really fun workbook, and you can listen to the music and do the workbook, or you can just do the workbook by itself, and it has secret educational messages in the songs.
It sounds so sly. Like secret educational messages. Like you don't know, but you're learning right now.
Exactly.
So this is very interactive, it sounds like. It comes with, you said, you know, like the music aspect of it. So how has the response been, you know, for people who purchase these books or, you know, get in touch with you, you know, just as a publisher or anything, you know, and just say like, you know, oh, I love this story, or, you know, what kind of feedback do you get from, you know, your readers?
Well, you know, we've gotten some really great reviews, but a lot of times, you know, we're selling to bookstores, and so we don't get a chance to get feedback. But we do like the Soulful Chicago Book Fair and other book fairs, and I love to do those myself. I like to man the tables because I love to see what people are going to say, especially the children. And there's been a couple of times that this is like my favorite part of the day. So, and it's, you know, it's a long day, and you're standing, you're talking to people all day. But a couple of times I've had these, like a little boy come up to the table, and in one case, he grabbed a copy of Q Saves the Sun, and he ran off. And I was like, okay, I guess
like, do you say no at that point? Like,
right. I mean, what do you do?
Read,
exactly. So he comes back with the book, and he's like, my mom said we have to go to the rest of the tables before we can get a book. And so an hour later, Mom comes back to the table, and she's like, he wouldn't look at any other book. And so they bought the book, and then he sat down right in front of the table and read the book from cover to cover, and, you know, and walked away. And, you know, and his mom was like, he really loved it because he wouldn't have done that otherwise. And so it's times like that that just make my whole world, because it's like, that's why I do this, is just to really engage children and really get them excited about reading.
For sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, let's take a quick music break, and then we'll jump back in about how, you know, what your opinion is on, like, the digital age and, you know, all of that fun stuff.
Okay.
Great. Throwing it to Gabe in the studio to play some tunes now. 7:48 here on Radio 1 Chicago. This is Alex in the green room, talking with Joy Triche of Tiger Stripe Books. So I really want to hear more about Q's adventure. So would you be able to read an excerpt from the story for us?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Okay. Tonight, just like every night, my dad describes a dream to me. It's always some incredible place he asks me to journey to, or better yet, an adventure he wants me to go on. Okay, Q, Dad says. Tonight, you're an intergalactic space traveler, and while you and your crew are out exploring the universe, you discover a race of alien robots trying to steal the sun. Once the lights go out, I close my eyes and the adventure begins. And I become Super Q, fearless adventurer and space explorer. Along with my faithful sidekick, Brian, the Tyrannosaurus Rex, I accept the missions my father gives me and face new villains each and every night. As our heroes, Super Q and Brian the Tyrannosaurus Rex, begin their expedition into the darkest reaches of the cosmos, a terrible sight comes into view. There, Brian, Super Q shouts. Those treacherous aliens have already managed to connect their ship to our sun. Quickly, Super Q decides on a daring course of action. Hit the thrusters, Brian. We'll chase these aliens to the ends of the universe if that's what it takes.
Ooh, and you will have to get it to know more. I love how the Tyrannosaurus Rex is named Brian. Like, I think that's adorable. So how has, like we mentioned earlier, how, trying to steer, kids away from like tablets and all those things. Are these publications also available online at all, or are they just physical copies that you publish?
Actually, they're just physical copies. Mm-hmm. So when I first started out and when I was working with the Grannies on Safari, we actually did a couple of ebooks. And those were really fun because we made it so they were on Safari. And of course, and so you could touch them and you could hear the sounds of the animals, which was kind of fun because some of the animals were like, what does a zebra say? I wasn't sure. And so that was really fun. But really, it was my youngest daughter, Sabria, that kind of got me to thinking about just doing hard copy books. She loved to read, and children bring stuffed animals home to bed with them. She would bring a book to bed with her, which was concerning when she had hardcover books and they were so pointy. But and she was so little. But she really the idea of picking a book up off the shelf was something that children like to do. And I liked to be able to provide that. Now, I love ebooks for myself, and I will buy a hardcover book, and then I will leave it on the shelf to keep it nice, and then I'll buy the ebook, and I'll read the ebook on my phone.
Oh, interesting.
But for myself, I feel like with picture books, I like the idea of them being hard copy. But I do believe in that there's some really cool interactivity and extra content that can be added when you do create an ebook. And so when we do ebooks, it'll be for that purpose.
Gotcha.
To add another layer to it.
To keep that dimension and add another behind the scenes almost. I guess
exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Like the sounds we did for the safari.
Exactly.
So yeah, I think so.
Yeah. So you also have two other books that you brought with you that I didn't see initially that you would wanted to chat about. So tell us more about these.
Yeah. Okay. So we have two more books coming out in the spring, and the first one is called The Yawn Book, and it's yawns are contagious, and this book really proves it because you really can't get through reading this book without yawning.
Oh, gosh.
But it's about a yawn that went around the world and resulted in peace and quiet. And the hope is that will happen in your home. And for when you have small children and you're like babies, you're trying to get them to sleep. This is a perfect book because if you don't fall asleep reading it, your children will definitely fall asleep reading it.
It's good. Good to know.
And the author is also the illustrator, Gene Mandarino, and he's a retared advertising guy. Oh, nice. And he's amazing, and his artwork is very cool.
Yeah.
You can't see it.
Yeah. We'll post them on Instagram.
Okay.
Follow us on Instagram. Follow Tiger Stripe Books on Instagram, just so we can see a sneak peek of these upcoming books and then the books that you brought with us too.
Absolutely.
And then,
absolutely.
Yeah.
So then for our the next book that we have coming out this spring is called Nuri Means Light. And we partnered with a company called This Little Light of Mine to develop this book. So This Little Light of Mine, they had this character called Nuri, and they have her on T-shirts and on other apparel. And really, their whole idea is to promote self-love and self-confidence among little Black girls. And so we took the Nuri character and we wanted to create a story around her at Tiger Stripe. And Nuri, one of the things that we've, one of the beautiful things about the world today, about our city, we talked about diversity. Mm-hmm. And so sometimes you come across names of people that you're like, that's a funny sounding name. I don't know what that means.
Yeah.
But, sometimes we don't even go to the whole meaning part. We just think it's funny sounding or you just can't pronounce it. And so that's what this story delves into, what the meaning is behind people's names or what their story is behind their name. And so that's what the book is about. Nuri finds out at school that somebody's name means something. Rafiki means friend. He says it when he's introducing himself to the class. And then the rest of the day she's like, wait a minute, names mean something? Mm-hmm. And so she explores that.
Great. And then when is this one set to be released?
In March.
Oh, perfect. So we'll keep an eye out for that for sure. Well, before we head out, tell everyone where you can find more information about Tiger Stripe Books and find you on social media and all that good stuff.
Okay. So our website is tigerstripepub.com. And on Twitter and Instagram, we're Tiger Stripe BKS.
For books.
I'm assuming. Yes.
Awesome. Well, fabulous. Thank you so much for coming in and for bringing these stories along. People should definitely check them out. I think, being in Chicago, it is such a diverse place. And so just to further emphasize that and, just share the love kind of thing, I think it's great.
Thank you. Okay. Thank you for having me.
Awesome. All right. Well, that's wrapping it up for today. Very busy Thursday here at Radio 1 Chicago, but always exciting for Weekend Gabe and I. Thanks for tuning in. Be sure to check us out next week, 6 to 8 regular time on 88.7 FM WLUW.